Hello, welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I'm reading each chapter out of all the books I've written, and I'm on the fifth book, which is Love Endures All Things, Book Two, Across the Creek, and I'm on chapter 7 today. It is entitled Creatures of the Wilderness. If you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, I'm reading these stories, and this is the second 15 years of my marriage to Miss Stephanie. We're married for 47 and a half years. Miss her still, but that's okay. We had a lot of years together, and I was just as devoted to her as she was to me. I'm thankful for that. Uh, Title of this chapter is The Creatures of the Wilderness. So let's get started with it. Back when this place was called Ryansville, that is where we'd bought, uh, there had been a house about 50 feet behind where we were building our house. That was almost 100 years before we started building. Through research, I learned that my grandmother's family had lived in this very area 120 years before me, and my family lived there. The place was new to us, but truly there is nothing new under the sun. As we were adjusting to the new way of life, we discovered that we were living in the midst of all the wildlife that was there before us. The wild animals must have become accustomed to our presence and were not as easily frightened as they might otherwise be. We could see deer and coyotes from time to time. Also, we would see the occasional bobcat. It became more common as time went by. We were about we were about at odd times of the day because of the work schedule we had. We both worked second shift for some time. We acquired a flat bottom aluminum boat uh, brought to us by our daughter. She got it from her husband's father. We would drive to the nearest house on the other side of the creek when it was high and park the cars there for safekeeping while we were home. We would walk about half a mile to the creek crossing and boat across the creek in the flat bottom boat. After the crossing, we had to walk another half mile to the car that worked very well while we had the same hours. It did not work so good when we had different hours. We would have to take both the cars and the truck, both the car and the truck, to go to work. We were patient with the creek and were learning what to expect. As for how long it stayed too high to drive to, it usually it was unusual that it lasted 2 or 3 days if we got 1 inch of rain. If we got more than an inch, the creek could take up to 2 weeks before it went low enough to drive in. During our second year there, a family of beavers moved in about a half mile down the stream from the low water bridge. I noticed the problem after a storm though though the and came through, and uh, dropped about 1.5 inches of rain. We waited almost 2 weeks before that took the boat downstream until we discovered the dam that the big rodents had constructed to back up the creek to a level of about 14 inches higher than it should be that long after the storm. This was Saturday, and we invited everyone that we knew to come help us destroy the dam. Nobody came, so we set to the chore, and it was truly a difficult job. I don't know how those beavers were able to weave the twigs and sticks together so tightly. It was almost impossible to break up the work that they had done on this dam. I said we needed to uh, pat, we needed a pat on the back because of the difficult work we were doing. We never saw the beavers, but within 2 weeks, the creek went up again. This time we hadn't had any rain, and we knew it was the animals of nature flooding the road. There was no doubt when we walked downstream and the little boogers had replaced the structure with a new one. When we had torn the first dam apart, it was piled on the bank on either side of the creek. Those little engineers had brought all the old branches back together, and this dam was better built than the first one. I sent Stephanie home, and I spent most of that day disassembling what they had done. It took several hours, but I set all their work adrift downstream, and there would be no building supplies left there. I had trouble with the beavers about every 2 or 3 months for the rest of that year. One day, while we were having to boat in and out, we came home about midnight, and after the walk to the creek and the boat ride across the creek, we began the last half mile, and we always had the best talks as we made that trip at the end of our days. It was a way to unwind no matter how hard our days were, and I think Stephanie enjoyed the time we spent together as much as I did. I can say it was not difficult because it was, or I can't say it was not difficult because it was, but I think it drew us closer together than any other time in our lives could have done. We talked to the kids about the time we lived out there off grid, and the youngest ones also said they loved it too. That makes me wonder if we don't just have too easy a life nowadays. We had to deal with all kinds of snakes around the place. The backside of the property backed up to the national forest, and nobody lived back there. We were walking home one night about 1 a.m. and heard a strange sound. I didn't want to scare my lovely wife, but I thought it was a mountain lion. The next morning, we walked down the same road and found an extremely large cat footprint in the road we had walked the night before. After that, I carried my target pistol and holster when I had to walk. The wildlife was uncomfortably close. Some men are worse than the animals, though. The neighbor where we first parked our cars was a seemingly nice fellow. He was married to a woman that kept to herself most of the time. This man was called Dan Holloman, who I will just call Dan from here on. This Dan had spent much time in a mental hospital in Bonita, Oklahoma. Stephanie and I were not aware of that fact until he showed his true colors. One night, Stephanie came home a little early, and when she parked the car at his mailbox or at our mailbox by his house, he was sitting on the porch in the dark. He made a loud noise to get Stephanie's attention. I think it was to scare her as well. I had her drive down to the creek, and we would ride after back with her after that. We would walk together from then on. But that is just the beginning of this trouble we had with Dan. We began to park at the neighbor's house that was next door to Dan. This made Dan very angry at us. Stephanie would drive to the creek, and I, let's say, Stephanie would drive to the creek, and I left her there and drove the car back and parked it. Dan would come out to his porch and slap a hunter's knife against his hand to make a smacking noise as loud as he could. I think it was done to frighten me. I was young and foolish in those days, so I started carrying my pistol when I went to take the car back to park it. The creek was high quite a lot that spring. On a Saturday afternoon, Stephanie and I went to Jim's country store about 2 miles from the creek. We needed to get a few things, and Dan was there and um, cornered me to talk to me. He said to me, "I'm going to come to your house tonight and kill you at midnight." I said, "I'll watch for you." Stephanie was already in the store, and didn't hear what he had said. When I came into the store, I asked Jim if he thought Dan was dangerous. That is when we learned that he had spent nearly half his life locked up in one of those hospitals, and that is where he got his wife. We went to a small church in the little town near us. One of the members of that church was a deputy sheriff for Sequoia County. I called him and asked him if he could come out to our place about midnight, and I explained the threat that Dan had made. He knew who Dan was. We went home and talked about what Dan had said and decided we would wait and see what would happen. I told my sons, Mike and Brian, about it too. They came to the house and said they would stay until sometime after midnight. As it got late, 11 p.m. or so, they each took one or two of my guns and got on top of the house. They were going to stand guard and keep watch out for Dan. I wasn't sure that Dan was intending to follow through. I told Stephanie so as well. But a man not in his right mind may do anything. So I thought it better to stay on the ready just in case. The witching hour came and went. Nothing had happened, and I was a little more at ease. I think Stephanie was too. I told the boys to get off of the roof and relax. About 12:30, my friend, the deputy, pulled up and I went out to talk to him. I told him that Dan had not showed up. While we were talking, the dogs came running out of the house and started barking at the weeds just across the fence. After just a little while, the deputy walked over there and looked around some. Just then, he pulled out his pistol and pointed it at the ground. He said in a loud and gruff voice, "Get up and raise your hands." He repeated that same command 3 more times. I then saw Dan raise to his feet. He had a hatchet in his belt and a machete on the other side. He had a butcher's knife in one hand and a hunting knife in the other. He had come prepared to do some damage. The deputy was still holding his gun on Dan. When I started yelling, "Shooting!" I said that 4 or 5 times when Dan finally dropped all of his weapons. The deputy then put handcuffs on him and started searching him, and he found a package of several condoms in one of his pockets, but no ID on him at all. It goes to show that the man animals are likely to be more dangerous than the animals in the woods. The natural animals are far more predictable and thus less dangerous to be around. Back to the natural wildlife. We were always on the lookout for snakes. I captured a 9-year-old velvet tailed rattlesnake near the house. I had an old Indian man called Snake Sam take it to sell it at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. I never saw a cent from it, and I asked Sam if he sold it. He said, "No, I'm going to keep that one as a guard snake in my Jeep." I surely didn't want it back. We had no idea how strange a road we were traveling on would be. I hope you enjoyed this story. It was kind of an odd one, but we've experienced all kinds of things, so it just seems to come and go. If you get to hurry for the next stories, let's see what's the next one on this. When I do it, it's other things, chapter 8. If you get in a hurry, you can go to my web page, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, and it has links that'll take you to Amazon where you can buy this and my other books. They come in paperback and in ebooks. Some of my books come in hardback. Uh, but until the next time, I'll say, oh, I just realized I'm wearing a T-shirt that I got from my brother. He lives in Alaska. That's why I have an Alaska. I live down in Alabama. I ain't going where it's cold. You guys take care and talk to you later. God bless you.